He walked in like he owned the city. Nikolai Sokolov, the Bratva's deadliest enforcer. To him, the waitress trembling with the wine bottle was just furniture. Just another invisible servant to be mocked, used, and discarded. He laughed at her, insulting her honor in Russian, thinking she was just a clueless American girl. He couldn't have been more wrong. When she locked eyes with him and replied in the perfect, cold dialect of the Moscow underworld, the music stopped, the guards froze, and the most feared man in the city realized too late. The woman holding the wine wasn't a servant. She was the one thing he should have feared. The Obsidian Room in downtown Manhattan didn't just smell of money. It smelled of old power and fresh corruption. It was the kind of place where a bottle of Chateau Petrus cost more than a Honda Civic, and the men sitting in the velvet booths decided who became a senator and who ended up in the Hudson River. For Cassidy, it was just a hiding spot. "Table 4 needs a refill on the sparkling water. Don't make eye contact," the floor manager, Silas, hissed as he passed her. Silas was a nervous little man who sweated through his polyester suits, terrified of his own clientele. "On it," Cassidy murmured, adjusting the heavy tray on her shoulder. Her name wasn't really Cassidy. It wasn't really Sarah, or Paige, or any of the 3 names she'd used in the last 4 years. But Cassidy was the name on the name tag pinned to her chest, right above the cheap, scratchy fabric of her uniform. She kept her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun and wore glasses she didn't need. The goal was to be forgettable, to be a ghost. She moved through the dimly lit dining room with practiced efficiency. She had spent the last 6 months here, serving the worst of New York's elite. Hedge fund managers who tipped in stock tips, politicians with their mistresses, and the occasional cartel lieutenant trying to look legitimate. She swallowed her pride every night, took their abuse, and went home to a tiny studio apartment in Queens with 3 deadbolt locks. She was safe here, or so she thought. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted at 8:15 p.m. It was a subtle change, like the air pressure dropping before a tornado touches down. The ambient chatter died out. The clinking of silverware on china stopped. The double doors swung open, and 3 men walked in. Cassidy felt the chill hit her spine before she even looked up. She knew that walk. She knew that specific brand of arrogant silence. Leading the pack was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and dressed by an Italian tailor, Nikolai Sokolov. He was tall, with hair the color of midnight, and eyes that looked like shattered ice. He wore a charcoal 3-piece Brioni suit that fit him like a second skin, not a single crease out of place. On his wrist sat a Patek Philippe Nautilus, platinum, understated, but worth a fortune. He was the new Pahan, the boss of the Russian Bratva in New York, a man rumors said had killed his way to the top with his bare hands. Behind him were his dogs. Dmitri, a hulking mass of muscle with a scar running through his eyebrow, and Victor, the younger, jumpier one, who always kept a hand near his jacket pocket. Cassidy's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Don't look up. Don't breathe wrong. Just be the furniture. They were seated at the VIP booth in the far corner, the one with the best view of the exits. It was Cassidy's section. "Cassidy," Silas whispered, appearing at her elbow, his face pale. "They requested the vintage list. You take it. I have to check on the kitchen." Coward. She took the leather-bound wine list, her hands trembling slightly. She forced herself to take a deep breath. She had survived worse than waiting on a mobster. She had survived the fire in St. Petersburg. She had survived the purge. She could pour wine for Nikolai Sokolov. She approached the table, keeping her eyes lowered to the level of the tablecloth. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice soft, American, harmless. "The wine list." She placed the book on the table. Nikolai didn't look at her. He was busy scanning the room, his eyes dissecting every shadow. Dmitri, however, looked. He looked her up and down with a sneer that made her skin crawl. "Water," Nikolai said. His voice was deep, a heavy baritone wrapped in a thick, velvety accent. Still, no ice. Of course, Cassidy said. She retreated to the service station, her hands shaking as she filled 3 crystal glasses. Just get through the shift, she told herself. 1 hour. Then they leave. Then you go home. When she returned, the men were speaking in low, rapid-fire Russian. They weren't discussing business, they were discussing the city. Who needed to be squeezed, who needed to be paid off. They spoke freely, arrogant in the assumption that the American help couldn't understand a word. Cassidy understood every syllable. She placed the water down in front of Dmitri first, then Victor. Finally, she moved to Nikolai. As she leaned in to place the glass on a coaster, Dmitri reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron, bruising her skin. "Careful, sweet thing," Dmitri grunted in English, flashing a yellow-toothed smile. "You almost spilled it." She hadn't. Her hand had been steady. It was a power play, a way to dominate the space. "I apologize, sir," Cassidy whispered, trying to pull her arm back. He didn't let go. Nikolai finally turned his head. He looked at Dmitri, then at Cassidy's trapped wrist, then up at her face. His eyes were terrifyingly intelligent. He wasn't looking at her like a person. He was assessing a threat level. Finding none, he looked bored. "Dmitri," Nikolai said, switching to English, "let the girl go. We are here to eat, not to play with the livestock." Livestock. Dmitri laughed and released her arm. Cassidy stumbled back a half step, clutching her wrist. A red mark was already forming. "Bring us the Grand Cru," Nikolai ordered, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "And be quick about it." Cassidy retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, closing her eyes. The rage was a hot, molten knot in her stomach. She hated them. She hated their arrogance, their cruelty, the way they looked at the world as something to be consumed. But she couldn't do anything. She was Cassidy Miller, a waitress from Ohio. She wasn't Katerina Volkov anymore. Katerina Volkov was dead. She had to stay dead. 30 minutes passed. The restaurant filled up, the noise level rising to a dull roar. Cassidy tried to swap tables with another server, a guy named Greg, but Silas caught her. "No switching," Silas hissed. Sokolov asked for the blonde. "You go back out there." Asked for the blonde. A chill went through her. She picked up the tray with their appetizers, Osetra caviar and blinis, naturally, and walked back into the lion's den. As she approached table 4, the mood had shifted. They were drinking vodka now, straight from a frozen bottle. Dmitri was loud, his face flushed. Nikolai remained sober, watchful, sipping his drink like it was water. Cassidy began to clear the empty glasses to make room for the food. She moved quickly, trying to be invisible. Dmitri was telling a story in Russian, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear the tone, if not the words. "So I told the little rat," Dmitri bragged in Russian, slamming his hand on the table, "if you don't have the money, I take the wife. Fair trade, right, boss?" Nikolai swirled his vodka. "You lack finesse, Dmitri. That is why you will always be a hammer, never the hand." "A hammer gets the job done," Dmitri grunted. He looked up as Cassidy reached across the table to collect a napkin. He decided he was bored again. As she leaned over, Dmitri deliberately knocked his heavy elbow into her tray. It happened in slow motion. The crystal glass on her tray tipped. Ice and water cascaded down onto the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto the sleeve of Nikolai's $3,000 suit. The entire section of the restaurant went silent. Cassidy froze. She clutched the tray to her chest, her eyes wide. I'm so sorry. I didn't..." Nikolai slowly looked down at his wet sleeve. He brushed a droplet of water off the wool. Then he looked up at Cassidy. His face was unreadable, which made it infinitely more terrifying than Dmitri's anger. "You clumsy bitch!" Dmitri roared in English, half rising from his seat. "Do you know how much that costs?" "Sit down, Dmitri," Nikolai said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel sentence. Dmitri sat, though he kept glaring at Cassidy. Nikolai locked eyes with her. "You are shaking," he observed in English. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll get a towel. I'll pay for the cleaning," Cassidy stammered, playing the part. The terrified waitress. Nikolai leaned back, crossing his arms. He looked at her with pure, unadulterated contempt. He turned to Dmitri and spoke in Russian, his voice low, assuming total privacy in his insults. "Look at her," Nikolai said in Russian, his tone dripping with aristocratic disdain. "Shaking like a leaf. This is what happens when you let peasants into high society. They smell the money and lose their minds." Dmitri laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "She's pretty though, boss. Maybe we take her with us. Teach her how to be useful?" Nikolai sneered. "She is garbage, Dmitri. Look at her eyes. Empty, cowardly. American women are soft. They have no spine. She is just a piece of meat with a name tag. Leave her be. I don't want to dirty my hands." Something inside Cassidy snapped. It was the word coward. She had watched her father die. She had walked through a minefield in Chechnya to escape the FSB. She had dismantled a Glock in under 5 seconds when she was 12 years old. She had erased her entire existence to survive. She was many things, a liar, a survivor, a ghost. But she was not a coward. And she was certainly not meat. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Cassidy stopped trembling. Her posture straightened, the slump of the tired waitress vanishing instantly. Her chin lifted. The fear in her eyes evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard diamond of fury. She tossed the dirty napkin she was holding onto the table. It landed right in front of Nikolai. The restaurant was quiet, watching the scene, expecting the poor girl to run away, crying. Instead, Cassidy looked Nikolai dead in the eye. "Your suit is replaceable, Sokolov," she said. She didn't speak in English. She spoke in Russian, but not just any Russian. She spoke in the Fenya, the criminal argot of the high-ranking thieves-in-law, with the specific, aristocratic St. Petersburg lilt that only the old families used. It was a dialect of authority, of command. "But your manners," she continued, her Russian flawless, cold as a Siberian winter, "those cannot be bought, apparently, not even with all your blood money." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence when they had walked in. This was the silence of a bomb that had just armed itself. Dmitri's mouth fell open. The glass in Victor's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Nikolai stared at her. For the first time all night, the boredom vanished from his face. His pupils dilated. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the predator hiding beneath the prey's skin. He slowly stood up. He towered over her, radiating menace. "Who are you?" Nikolai asked in Russian, his voice a low growl. Cassidy didn't flinch. She stepped closer to him, invading his personal space, challenging him in a way no one had done in years. "I am the person who decides if you get your wine," she replied in Russian, her voice dropping an octave, deadly serious, "or if I pour the rest of this bottle down your throat." "Sit down, Nikolai. You are making a scene." She switched back to English, turning her head to the stunned floor manager hovering nearby. "Silas," she called out, her voice clear and commanding. "Mr. Sokolov needs a fresh napkin, and bring the key 82 Margot. On the house." She looked back at the Mafia Don, her blue eyes blazing with a dark fire. "Unless there's a problem," she challenged. Nikolai looked at her, stunned, intrigued, and for the first time in his life, impressed. "No problem," Nikolai said softly, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "No problem at all." The rest of the dinner service was an exercise in psychological warfare. Most servers would have fled. They would have faked an illness, run out the back door, and never returned to pick up their last paycheck. But Cassidy knew that running now would be a death sentence. Men like Nikolai Sokolov were predators. If you ran, their instinct to chase kicked in. If you stood your ground, however, They became cautious. They analyzed. She returned to the table with the 1982 Chateau Margaux. Her hands were steady now, her face a mask of professional indifference. Silas, the manager, watched from the kitchen doorway, chewing his fingernails. He had expected bloodshed. Instead, he saw the most feared man in New York watching his waitress with the intensity of a man studying a complex chess move. Cassidy presented the bottle to Nikolai. She didn't look at Dmitri or Victor. To her, they were already dead men walking. Thugs with guns but no brains. Nikolai was the only gravity in the room. "Chateau Margaux, 1982, she announced, her voice flat, decanted as requested. "Toh." She poured a splash into his glass for the tasting. Nikolai didn't look at the wine. He looked at her wrists, checking for tattoos. He looked at her neck, checking for scars. He was dissecting her history. He picked up the glass, swirled it once, and drank. "Perfect," he murmured in Russian. "You learned to pour like that in Ohio, Cassidy?" He said her fake name like it was a joke. "I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials," she replied dryly in English, filling his glass. Nikolai chuckled. It was a dark, rich sound that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. "I don't think so. You have the posture of a ballerina and the tongue of a Vol. That is a dangerous combination." "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Sokolov. Enjoy your steak." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. It wasn't a shout, just a low command that cut through the restaurant noise. "I didn't dismiss you." Cassidy froze. She turned back slowly. "Is there something else?" Nikolai leaned forward, resting his chin on his steepled fingers. The candlelight danced in his icy eyes. "Tell me, why is a woman who speaks the high dialect of St. Petersburg scrubbing tables in Manhattan? You speak the language of the inner circle, the old families." "My grandmother was Russian," she lied effortlessly. "She taught me. She was very strict about grammar." "And did your grandmother also teach you how to look at a man with a gun and calculate how to kill him?" Nikolai asked softly. "Because that is what you did when Dmitri touched you. You didn't look for an exit. You looked for a weapon." Dmitri stopped chewing his steak. He looked from his boss to the waitress, suddenly realizing he might have been closer to death than he thought. Cassidy's expression didn't change. "You have an active imagination, sir. I just wanted him to let go of my arm. We shall see." Nikolai picked up his knife and cut into his steak with surgical precision. "I will be watching you, Cassidy. Don't disappoint me." For the next hour, Cassidy felt his gaze burning into her back. Every time she refilled a water glass at another table, every time she punched an order into the computer, she felt him. He wasn't just eating dinner. He was hunting. When they finally finished, Nikolai paid the bill in cash, a stack of crisp $100 bills left on the table. He didn't leave a tip. He left a card. It was black, heavy cardstock with a single golden embossed emblem, a wolf's head. No number, no name, just the symbol of the Sokolov Bratva. Cassidy stared at it after they walked out. It was an invitation, or perhaps a summons. She scooped it up along with the cash and shoved it into her apron pocket. Her hands were shaking again, now that the adrenaline was fading. "Cassidy!" Silas rushed over, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My God, what happened? Did you offend him? He left a fortune on the table." "He's just an eccentric rich guy, Silas," she said, her voice tight. "I'm clocking out. I feel sick. Go. Take the rest of the week if you want. Just don't quit. You're the only one who can handle the VIPs." Cassidy didn't plan on taking the week. She planned on taking the first bus to Montreal. She had a go bag in her apartment. Cash, a passport under the name Sarah Jenkins, and a prepaid burner phone. She changed out of her uniform in the locker room in record time. She threw on her oversized grey hoodie, baggy jeans, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. She pulled her hair down, letting it fall over her face. The goal was to transform from the elegant waitress back into a street urchin. She exited through the kitchen, nodding to the dishwasher, and pushed open the heavy steel door that led to the alleyway. The cold November air hit her like a slap. It smelled of wet pavement and exhaust. She took a deep breath, clutching her backpack straps. Straight to the subway. Don't look back. She took 3 steps into the alley and stopped. The lone street lamp at the end of the alley flickered. Beneath it, leaning against the brick wall, was a figure wreathed in cigarette smoke. It wasn't Dmitri or Victor. It was him. Nikolai Sokolov pushed off the wall and dropped his cigarette, crushing it beneath his polished Oxford shoe. "You change clothes fast," he said. "Running somewhere?" Cassidy didn't run. Running triggers the chase. Instead, she widened her stance slightly, shifting her weight to the balls of her feet. Her hand drifted toward her pocket, where she kept a tactical pen, a pointed shard of hardened steel disguised as a writing implement. "My shift is over," she said, her voice rougher now, dropping the polite server act. "I'm going home." Nikolai walked toward her. He moved with a predatory grace that was terrifying to behold in the narrow alley. "I don't think so. I looked into you, Cassidy Miller. It seems you didn't exist before 2021. No tax records, no high school diploma, no birth certificate, just a social security number that belongs to a dead girl from Ohio." He stopped 5 feet away from her, close enough to smell his cologne, sandalwood, and gunpowder. "Identity theft is a crime," he mocked. "Should I call the police?" "Since when does the Pakan of the Sokolov family talk to the police?" she shot back. Nikolai smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, sharp and dangerous. "There it is again. The knowledge. You know my rank. You know my family." He took another step. Cassidy pulled the tactical pen from her pocket, gripping it in a reverse hold. Nikolai glanced at the weapon and laughed. "A pen? You plan to edit me to death?" "I plan to stick it in your carotid artery if you take one more step," she said calmly. The smile vanished from Nikolai's face. He looked at her with a sudden, intense seriousness. "Who are you? And don't lie to me. I know a soldier when I see one." "Who sent you? The Italians? The FSB?" "Nobody sent me," Cassidy hissed. "I'm nobody. I just want to be left alone. Nobody wants to be left alone. Everyone wants something. Power, money, revenge." He studied her face, searching for a ghost of recognition. "You look like him, you know, around the eyes." "Like who?" "An old friend. A man who died screaming." Nikolai's voice dropped. "Volkov!" Cassidy's heart stopped. She forced her face to remain stone. "I don't know who that is." "Liar." He reached for her. He wasn't attacking. He was reaching for her shoulder, perhaps to shake the truth out of her. But before his hand could connect, the alley exploded with light. High beams blinded them both. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley, blocking the exit. The doors flew open. "Get down!" Cassidy screamed. She didn't think. Instinct took over. The training her father had beaten into her since she was 6 years old. She tackled Nikolai, driving her shoulder into his chest and knocking him behind a dumpster, just as the air filled with the deafening crack, crack, crack of automatic gunfire. Bullets chewed up the brick wall where Nikolai's head had been a second ago. Debris and red brick dust rained down on them. They were tangled together on the dirty asphalt behind the metal dumpster. Nikolai was heavy, a solid wall of muscle, but he moved with her, realizing instantly that they were under attack. "Yours!" she shouted over the gunfire. "No!" Nikolai reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black Sig Sauer. Rivals, the Georgian syndicate, probably. He popped up, fired 2 controlled shots, and ducked back down as a hail of bullets sparked against the metal dumpster. "I have 2 mags," Nikolai grunted, checking his weapon. "My car is around the corner, but we can't get past them." Cassidy looked around. The alley was a dead end behind them. The only way out was through the SUV full of gunmen. There were 4 men advancing, wearing ski masks and tactical vests. "Give me the gun," Cassidy said. Nikolai looked at her as if she was insane. "Excuse me? You're shooting center mass. They're wearing Kevlar vests. I can see the outline, she snapped, pointing at the advancing shadows. You're wasting ammo. Give me the damn gun. The gunmen were closing in. 30 feet. 20 feet. Nikolai hesitated for a split second. It was an insane choice. Hand his weapon to the mystery woman who might be an assassin? Or trust the waitress who just saved his life? He looked into her eyes. He saw the same cold calculation he saw in the mirror every morning. He handed her the gun. Cassidy didn't hesitate. She took the weapon, checked the chamber, and took a deep breath. She didn't pop up blindly. She rolled out from the side of the dumpster, staying low to the ground. 1, 2, 3. She fired 3 times. Rapid succession. The first gunman dropped, a hole in his throat, above the vest. The second gunman screamed and fell, clutching his kneecap, shattering the bone and immobilizing him. The third shot took the driver of the SUV, who was leaning out the window with an Uzi, right in the eye. The fourth man panicked. He scrambled back towards the vehicle, providing suppressing fire, but he was shooting wild. Cassidy rolled back behind the dumpster. She handed the gun back to Nikolai, the barrel smoking. Throat, kneecap, eye, she listed methodically. The last one is scared. He's reloading. You have 3 seconds to flank him. Nikolai stared at her. His mouth was slightly open. He looked at the bodies, then back at the waitress in the oversized hoodie. Holy hell, he whispered. 2 seconds, she reminded him. Nikolai snapped out of his trance. He moved. He rounded the dumpster, sprinted towards the SUV while the last gunman was fumbling with a magazine, and ended the fight with a single, professional shot. Silence returned to the alley, broken only by the hissing of the SUV's radiator and the distant wail of sirens. Cassidy stood up, brushing the alley grit off her jeans. She was trembling again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was the crash after the adrenaline high. Nikolai walked back to her. He didn't holster his gun, but he kept it pointed at the ground. He looked at the carnage she had inflicted, shots that a sniper would envy, made with a handgun in the dark. He stopped in front of her. The air between them was electric, charged with violence and a sudden, undeniable attraction. You are definitely not a waitress, Nikolai said, his voice rough. And you have terrible aim for a boss, she retorted, though her voice shook. Nikolai reached out. This time she didn't pull the pen. He took her chin in his hand, tilting her face up to the light. His thumb brushed against her cheek, wiping away a smudge of dirt. Katerina, he whispered. The name hung in the air like a ghost. Katerina Volkov, the daughter who vanished. Cassidy closed her eyes. The secret was out. The waitress was dead. You should have let them kill me, she whispered, because now that you know, I'm going to bring your whole world down. Try, Nikolai challenged, his eyes burning with possessive dark fire. But first, we need to get out of here before the police arrive. Get in the car. I'm not going with you. Katerina, he said, holstering his gun and buttoning his ruined suit jacket. You just killed 3 men of the Georgian syndicate. They will hunt you. The police will hunt you. I am the only safe place left in this city. He held out his hand. Come with me, or die in this alley. Sirens were getting louder. Blue and red lights reflected off the wet pavement at the end of the block. Cassidy looked at his hand. The hand of the enemy. The hand of the man who had taken her father's territory. She cursed softly in Russian, then took his hand. The ride to the penthouse was a blur of neon lights and heavy silence. Nikolai drove like he did everything else, with aggressive, calculated precision. Cassidy sat in the passenger seat of the bulletproof Aston Martin, her arms wrapped around herself, the adrenaline beginning to curdle into exhaustion. They didn't go to a warehouse or a bunker. They went to the spire of the tallest residential building in Tribeca. A private elevator, activated by Nikolai's palm print, whisked them up 60 stories in seconds. When the doors opened, Cassidy stepped into a world that was the polar opposite of her cramped studio in Queens. The penthouse was a cavern of glass, steel, and dark leather. The view of the Manhattan skyline was breathtaking. $1 billion worth of lights stretched out below them. But the windows were thick, reinforced polycarbonate. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress in the sky. "Don't touch the windows," Nikolai said, tossing his keys onto a marble console table. "Sensors. If you tap them too hard, the silent alarm trips and security swarm the lobby." "Paranoid?" Cassidy asked, walking further into the room. She felt small here, but she refused to show it. "Alive," he corrected. He walked to the wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He winced slightly as he reached for the bottle. Cassidy noticed the blood seeping through his white dress shirt just above the hip. "You're hit," she said. Nikolai glanced down. "Graze, a ricochet from the dumpster. It's nothing. It's bleeding through the silk. Sit down." "I don't need a nurse, Katerina. I need answers." "My name is Cassidy," she snapped, "and you're bleeding on your floor. Sit down, or I'll finish what the Georgians started." Nikolai stared at her for a moment, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. He sat on the edge of the massive leather sofa. "First aid kit is in the bathroom. Second door on the left." Cassidy retrieved the kit. When she returned, Nikolai had unbuttoned his shirt. His torso was a map of violence. Scars from knives, bullets, and wire were etched across his tanned skin. The fresh wound on his side was a jagged tear, shallow but messy. She knelt between his legs, soaking a piece of gauze in antiseptic. The dynamic in the room shifted. Moments ago, they were enemies. Now, her hands were on his skin. "This will sting," she murmured. She pressed the gauze to the wound. Nikolai didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just watched her face, his eyes tracing the line of her jaw, the way her lashes cast shadows on her cheeks. "Why did you save me?" he asked quietly. "Your father, old man Volkov. He hated me. He called me a mongrel because I wasn't born into the inner circle. I took his empire. By all rights, you should have put a bullet in my back in that alley." Cassidy focused on taping the bandage. Her hands were gentle, contrasting with the violence of her words. "I didn't save you for you. I saved you because if the Georgians take over New York, they'll burn the city down. They don't have rules. They target families, civilians. And I have rules? You're a monster, Nikolai," she said, looking up into his ice-blue eyes. "But you're a disciplined monster. There's order in your chaos." Nikolai reached out and tucked a strand of loose hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck, right over her pulse point. Her heart rate spiked, and she knew he could feel it. "I didn't kill him," Nikolai said. Cassidy froze. "What?" "Your father. I didn't pull the trigger. I took the territory, yes. I outmaneuvered him. But the order to execute him, that didn't come from me. It came from the council in Moscow. They thought he was getting soft. Too much exposure." "You expect me to believe that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed grief. "I don't care if you believe it," Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a rumble. "It is the truth. I am many things, Mishka, little mouse. But I am not a liar." He leaned in closer. The air between them was thick, heavy with the scent of whiskey, blood, and danger. The hatred was still there, but it was being twisted into something else. "Obsession. You have been hiding for 4 years," he murmured. "Scrubbing floors, serving wine to idiots, hiding your fire. Why? To stay alive. Is that living?" He gripped her chin gently. "Tonight, in the alley. That was the first time you were alive in our years. I saw it in your eyes. You aren't a waitress, Katerina. You are a queen in exile. And you belong in this world, whether you admit it or not." Cassidy wanted to pull away. She wanted to slap him, but her body betrayed her. She leaned into his touch, just a fraction of an inch. "I can't go back to this life," she said softly. "It destroys everything it touches." "Then let it destroy us," Nikolai whispered. He closed the distance. his lips crushed against hers, hungry and demanding. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a claiming. It tasted of danger and expensive scotch. Cassidy hesitated for a heartbeat, then her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. She kissed him back with all the pent-up fury and frustration of the last 4 years. For a moment, the world outside, the Georgians, the Bratva, the police, ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his skin and the desperate, frantic need to feel something other than fear. Nikolai pulled back, breathless, his forehead resting against hers. "Stay," he commanded, "not as a prisoner, but as my partner. Help me crush the Georgians. Then, if you want to leave, I will give you a new name, a new life, and enough money to disappear forever. I swear it." Cassidy looked at him, searching for the deception. She found only a fierce, terrifying intensity. "And if I stay?" she asked. "Then we burn the world down together." Morning light filtered through the heavy curtains, grey and unforgiving. Cassidy woke up alone in the massive bed. The sheets still smelled like him, sandalwood and musk. She sat up, clutching the duvet to her chest. The memories of the night before flooded back, making her face flush. She had slept with the enemy. She had slept with the Bakan. She found a note on the bedside table, written in sharp, angular handwriting. "I have business with the council. Dealing with the fallout from last night. Stay inside. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Make yourself at home. There are clothes in the closet." No, Cassidy sighed. She got up and walked to the closet. It was filled with women's clothes. Brand new, tags still on. Everything from silk loungewear to evening gowns. He must have had someone stock it while she slept. Or perhaps he kept it stocked for guests. The thought made a spike of jealousy stab her chest, which annoyed her. She had no right to be jealous. She chose a simple black cashmere sweater and jeans that fit surprisingly well. She wandered out into the living area. The penthouse was silent. She went to the kitchen to find coffee. As she was pouring a cup, the elevator chimed. Cassidy froze. Nikolai had said, "Do not open the door." But the elevator bypassed the front door. It opened directly into the foyer. She grabbed a steak knife from the butcher block and hid it behind her back, moving into the shadows of the hallway. The elevator doors slid open. It wasn't Nikolai. It was Dmitri. The scarred enforcer walked in, looking around with a sneer. He was followed by 2 men Cassidy didn't recognize. They didn't look like Bratva. They looked rougher. Mercenaries. "Boss isn't here," Dmitri muttered to the men. "Perfect." Cassidy's heart hammered. Dmitri wasn't supposed to be here, and he certainly wasn't supposed to be bringing strangers into the inner sanctum. "Check the bedroom," Dmitri ordered. "Find the girl. The Georgian boss wants her alive. He says she killed his brother last night." The blood drained from Cassidy's face. Dmitri was the leak. The ambush in the alley wasn't just random, it was set up. Dmitri had sold Nikolai out to the Georgians, and now he was cleaning up loose ends. She watched from the shadows as the 2 mercenaries headed towards the bedroom. Dmitri stayed in the living room, walking over to the bar to pour himself a drink from Nikolai's private stock. Think, Katerina, think. She couldn't fight 3 men. Not with a steak knife. She needed an exit. But the elevator required a palm print, and the windows were sealed. She was trapped. Unless... She remembered the fire suppression system. Cassidy slipped off her shoes to move silently. She crept towards the kitchen pantry. Inside, she knew, was the emergency breaker panel. Every high-end apartment had one. She reached the pantry door just as one of the mercenaries shouted from the bedroom. "She's not in here. Bed's unmade, though." "Find her!" Dmitri roared. "She can't have gone far." Cassidy slipped into the pantry and closed the door softly. She found the panel. She didn't just want the lights out. She wanted chaos. She found the breaker labeled Fire Suppression /HVAC. She used the tip of the steak knife to pry the cover off the main aesthetic control box, exposing the wires. She jammed the knife into the circuitry, sparking a short. Boom! A small explosion of sparks showered her hand. Instantly, the penthouse alarm began to scream, a high-pitched, deafening wail. The overhead sprinklers exploded into life, drenching the entire apartment in a curtain of water. "What the hell?" Dimitri shouted over the noise. Cassidy kicked the pantry door open and ran. The living room was a chaotic storm of water and flashing strobe lights. Dimitri was wiping water from his eyes, blinded. Cassidy sprinted for the elevator. She knew she couldn't use it, but she wasn't aiming for the elevator. She was aiming for the service shaft next to it. "There she is!" one of the mercenaries yelled, pointing. A bullet shattered a vase next to Cassidy's head. She dove behind the marble kitchen island, sliding across the wet floor. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the hanging rack, a weapon of opportunity. As the mercenary rounded the corner of the island, gun raised, Cassidy didn't hesitate. She swung the skillet with both hands, channeling all her fear into the blow. Clang! It connected with the mercenary's wrist, shattering the bone. He dropped the gun, screaming. Cassidy followed through with a knee to his face, knocking him cold. She scrambled for his gun, but Dimitri was there. He kicked the gun away, sending it skittering across the wet floor. He grabbed Cassidy by the hair, yanking her head back. "You little rat!" Dimitri hissed. His face inches from hers. Water dripped from his nose. "You think you can outsmart me? I ran this city before Nikolai came along." "You're a traitor," Cassidy spat, clawing at his hand. "Nikolai will kill you slowly." "Nikolai is a dead man walking," Dimitri laughed. "He's heading to the warehouse district right now for a peace meeting with the Georgians, a meeting I arranged. He thinks he's signing a treaty. He's walking into a firing squad." Cassidy's stomach dropped. The peace summit. It was a trap. "And you," Dimitri tightened his grip, "are my ticket out. The Georgians will pay double for the woman who humiliated them." He dragged her towards the elevator. Cassidy's hand flailed, searching for purchase. Her fingers brushed against the pocket of her wet jeans. The tactical pen. She still had it. She stopped fighting. She went limp. Dimitri, thinking she had given up, relaxed his grip slightly to press his hand against the elevator scanner. "Smart girl," he grunted. "Now." Cassidy exploded upward. She jammed the tactical pen into the soft flesh of Dimitri's thigh, driving it deep. Dimitri howled in agony and released her. Cassidy didn't run for the door. She ran for the console table where Nikolai had left. A spare transponder key. She had seen it last night. She grabbed the key fob. She sprinted for the service stairwell door, the one that didn't need a palm print, only a physical key for emergency exit. "Kill her!" Dimitri screamed, clutching his leg, blood pooling in the water on the floor. The second mercenary raised his weapon. Cassidy threw herself through the heavy fire door just as bullets pinged against the metal frame. She slammed it shut, the automatic lock engaging with a heavy thud. She was in the stairwell, safe for the moment. But she was 60 floors up, and Nikolai was walking into a trap across town. She looked at her watch. It was 11 a.m. Dimitri had said the meeting was right now. She didn't have time to run down 60 flights of stairs. She didn't have time to call the police. She needed to get to the warehouse district. She needed a weapon. And she needed to become Katerina Volkov one last time. She looked down the spiral of the stairwell, took a deep breath, and began to run. Not away from the danger, but toward the one man who might just be worth dying for. The warehouse district in Brooklyn was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken dreams. It was quiet, the kind of silence that swallows sound. Inside Warehouse 4B, however, the air was thick with the promise of violence. Nikolai sat at a folding metal table in the center of the vast, empty space. He was alone. Opposite him sat Luka Gogol, the head of the Georgian syndicate, a man with gold teeth and a reputation for skinning his enemies alive. Flanking Gogol were 10 heavily armed men. Nikolai had come alone as a show of strength, a traditional gesture for a peace treaty. But as he looked at Gogol's smiling face, he knew the truth. There was no treaty, You look comfortable, Sokolov, Gogol sneered in Russian, for a man sitting in his own coffin. I am comfortable because I know something you don't, Nikolai replied calmly, though his mind was racing, calculating angles, counting seconds. He was checking for exits. There were none. And what is that? That you are too stupid to organize this yourself, Nikolai said. You have a rat whispering in your ear. From the shadows of the catwalk above, a slow clap echoed. Dmitri stepped into the light, limping heavily, his leg bandaged where Cassidy had stabbed him. He looked down at his former boss with pure hatred. He always was the smart one, Dmitri called out, his voice echoing off the corrugated steel walls. Didn't I tell you, Luka? He sees everything, except the knife in his own back. Nikolai didn't look surprised. He just looked disappointed. Dmitri, I should have known. Ambition without talent is a dangerous thing. Shut up, Dmitri roared, limping down the metal stairs. I built this family while you were playing businessman. I did the dirty work, and what do I get? You bring in a waitress to disrespect me? You let a nobody humiliate me? That waitress, Nikolai said softly, has more honor in her little finger than you have in your entire body. She's dead, Dmitri lied, reaching the ground floor. He pulled a gun. My men are disposing of her right now. And now it's your turn. No more Sokolov family. Just me and our Georgian friends. Gogol laughed. Kill him, Dmitri. Let's be done with this. 12 guns raised, all pointed at Nikolai's chest. Nikolai took a deep breath. He braced himself to flip the table, to fight, to die on his feet like a wolf. Vroom! The sound came from outside, a high-pitched, screaming whine of a supercharged engine pushed to the red line. Everyone froze. Crash! The massive corrugated steel bay door behind the Georgians exploded inward. A black armored SUV, Nikolai's own backup vehicle from the penthouse garage, smashed through the metal like it was paper. Metal shrapnel flew everywhere. The SUV drifted sideways, tires screeching, slamming into 3 of the Georgian gunmen before they could even turn around. Chaos erupted. It's the girl! Dmitri screamed, diving behind a crate. The driver's side door kicked open. Cassidy rolled out. She wasn't wearing the waitress uniform anymore. She was dressed in tactical black, moving with the fluidity of a phantom. She held a submachine gun she had taken from the penthouse armory. She didn't spray and pray. She fired in controlled bursts. Pop, 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 pop. 2 Georgians dropped before they realized they were under attack. Nikolai didn't waste the distraction. He flipped the heavy metal table, using it as a shield as bullets sparked against it. He drew his backup weapon, a jagged karambit knife he kept in his boot, and threw it. It spun through the air and buried itself in the neck of the gunman closest to him. Nikolai rolled forward, grabbed the dying man's falling assault rifle, and joined the fray. "Cover me!" Cassidy shouted, her voice cutting through the gunfire. "Move!" Nikolai roared back. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if they had been fighting together for years. Cassidy suppressed the gunmen on the left. Nikolai flanked them on the right. It was a brutal, violent dance. She was no longer hiding. The ghost was gone. Katerina Volkov had returned. She fought with a cold, ruthless efficiency that terrified the Georgians. They were used to fighting thugs, not a woman trained by the old Soviet Guard. Within minutes, the warehouse floor was silent, save for the groans of the wounded and the hiss of steam from the smashed SUV. Only Dmitri was left. He was scrambling up the catwalk stairs, trying to reach the roof access. He was bleeding, panicked, a rat trapped in a burning building. Nikolai lowered his rifle. He looked at Cassidy. She was breathing hard, a smear of grease on her cheek, her eyes blazing. She looked magnificent. "He's yours," she said, nodding towards the catwalk. Nikolai climbed the stairs slowly. Dmitri reached the top door, but it was locked. He turned around, pressing his back against the cold steel, trembling. "Boss," Dmitri pleaded, holding his hands up. "Nikolai, brother, we can talk about this. It was Gogol. He forced me." Nikolai stopped 3 steps below him. He looked at the man he had once trusted with his life. "You said I was a businessman," Nikolai said calmly. "But you forgot where I came from, Dmitri. I came from the gutter, and in the gutter we don't make deals with rats." "Please," Dmitri sobbed. "I can help you. I know where their money is." "I don't need their money," Nikolai said. "I have something better." He glanced down at the floor below, where Cassidy stood amidst the wreckage, reloading her weapon, watching his back. "I have a queen." Nikolai raised his gun. Dmitri screamed. The shot rang out, singular and final. Underscore, 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 underscore. The aftermath. 2 hours later, the warehouse was a crime scene swarming with police. But Nikolai and Cassidy weren't there. They were in a private hangar at Teterboro Airport, sitting on the steps of a Gulfstream jet. The engines were spooling up. Nikolai was wrapping a fresh bandage around Cassidy's arm, where a bullet had grazed her. His touch was incredibly gentle. "The police commissioner owes me a favor," Nikolai said quietly. "The footage from the warehouse will disappear. The Georgians are broken. The city is ours." "Yours," Cassidy corrected, looking out at the runway lights. "I should go. Montreal is nice this time of year." Nikolai stopped wrapping her arm. He looked up at her, his expression intense. "Do not lie to me, Katerina. Not anymore. You don't want to run. You are tired of running." "And if I stay?" she asked, her voice wavering. "What am I? A soldier? A waitress?" Nikolai stood up, pulling her with him. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. "No," he said firmly. "My equal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't a ring. It was a pin, a small platinum wolf's head with diamond eyes, the insignia of the Pakhan. But this one was different. It had a crown. He pinned it to a tactical vest right over her heart. "The Volkov and Sokolov families were enemies for a decade," Nikolai murmured, leaning his forehead against hers. "But tonight, we united them in blood. Stay with me. Help me rule this city properly. No more hiding." Cassidy looked at the pin. Then she looked at the man who had seen through her disguise when the rest of the world looked away. The man who had handed her a gun instead of protecting her. She smiled, and for the first time in 4 years it reached her eyes. "Okay," she whispered, "but I have one condition." "Anything. You fire the chef at the Obsidian Room. His risotto is terrible." Nikolai laughed, a loud, joyous sound that echoed across the tarmac. He kissed her, deep and passionate, sealing a pact that would terrify the New York underworld for generations to come. The waitress was gone. Long live the Queen. And that is the incredible story of how a simple bottle of wine turned into a war for the soul of New York City. Cassidy proved that you should never judge someone by their uniform, because the person pouring your water might just be the most dangerous person in the room. In a world full of fake tough guys like Dmitri, she showed that true power isn't about how loud you shout, but how hard you fight when your back is against the wall. Karma didn't just hit the bad guys. It ran them over with an armored SUV. What would you have done in her shoes? Would you have run to Montreal, or would you have stayed to fight alongside the boss? Let me know your choice in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and justice, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload new drama every single day. Thanks for watching.